Hello and welcome to another edition of Weapons in Warfare. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson. On tap this week, some major developments in Ukraine's war against Russia's illegal invasion. A little less than a year after President Biden gave the green light to allied nations to provide Ukraine with a fleet of used F-16s, that offer is now a reality. Just ahead, hear from a Ukrainian pilot about what this means for his country. And we take a look at the Hawkeye howitzer. Mounted to a Humvee, it makes for a very powerful shoot-and-scoot weapon of the week. But first, here are some headlines you may have missed. More American defensive capabilities are headed to the Middle East to bolster force protection for U.S. troops in the region and to defend Israel. According to Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh, the deployment is in response to continued threats from Iran and Iranian-backed militias.
As you know, and as we've demonstrated since October and again in April, the United States' global defense is dynamic, and the department retains the capability to deploy on short notice to meet evolving national security threats.
Which units and equipment will be deployed remains to be seen as of press time, but Singh stressed any capabilities will be purely defensive and will send a message of deterrence. The U.S. handed over its last military base in Niger to local authorities. The outpost was one of two crucial hubs for American counterterrorism operations in the country. The handing over of Air Base 201 in the city of Agadez came after U.S. troops withdrew last month from Air Base 101, a small drone base in Niger's capital of Niamey.
Over the past decade, U.S. troops have trained Niger's forces and supported partner-led counterterrorism missions against Islamic State and Al-Qaeda in the region.
In recent months, Niger pulled away from its Western partners, turning instead to Russia for security. In April, Russian military trainers arrived in Niger to reinforce the country's air defenses. And the U.S. Army signed off on the Milestone B decision for the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft, or, if you like acronyms, the FLRAA. The decision comes after a successful preliminary design review and a meeting of the Army Systems Acquisition Review Council. Milestone B allows the Army to exercise contract options and continue developing the aircraft as it enters the engineering and manufacturing development phase. Built by Bell Textron, the V-280 Valor is a tilt-rotor aircraft designed to have a crew of 4 and the capability to transport up to 14 troops. The Army is planning for the first FLRAA flight in 2026, with low-rate initial production scheduled to begin in 2028 and initial fielding activity in 2030. In May 2023, President Joe Biden announced his decision to greenlight a plan to have America's allies train Ukrainian pilots, as well as provide the country's military with surplus F-16s from the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, and Norway. That sparked a concerted effort to not only train pilots, but also ground crews, maintainers, and munitions troops, among others. No small task, given the pressing nature of the country's war against Russia. But a little less than a year later, those plans became a reality. The arrival of F-16s in Ukraine is arguably one of the biggest developments in that country's defense since Russia's illegal invasion in February 2022.
Я пишаюсь усіма нашими хлопцями, які якісно.
I am proud of all our guys who are mastering these planes and have already started using them for our country.
Для нашої держави.
I thank our team for this important result.
Важливий результат. Дякую партнерам, які
Thank you to the partners who effectively helped with the F-16 and the first countries that accepted our request for the provision of planes.
But it was never a sure thing. Only after receiving assurances from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Ukraine would not use the fourth-generation fighter in Russian territory Did President Biden agree to join the coalition of allies in providing the training and hardware?
To strengthen Ukraine's Air Force as part of a long-term commitment to Ukraine's ability to defend itself. We provided to last year all that they needed to deal with what they were dealing with at the moment. And that's when now we're moving in the direction of putting them in a position to be able to defend themselves in ways beyond what they've had to deal with so far.
That decision put into motion a full court press to get Ukrainian airmen trained in all things F-16. Essentially an intense boot camp for language skills, maintenance, and the machine at the heart of it all.
We study a lot, we fly a lot, we prep for the missions, and so on. Royal Danish Air Force has taken a huge responsibility on their shoulders for carrying out this mission. And we can only imagine how hard it is for them to train us for day-to-day operation, but they are being nothing but supportive.
That support comes in a multinational effort. While the U.S. contributed significantly, the Dutch, Belgians, Norwegians, and Danish are doing the lion's share of hands-on work with not only the Ukrainians, but the early model F-16s destined for the skies over the war-torn country. Major General Jan Dam, chief of the Royal Danish Air Force, says the Ukrainians are getting good equipment.
It has been updated several times, and actually, as it is right here, it's a very, very modern aircraft. It's competitive with the best Western fighters, and so you will. And I'm sure that the Ukrainian Air Force will benefit from that. We have a lot of sympathy with the Ukrainian people, and we want to do whatever we can to help.
While it's too soon to know what role the F-16s will ultimately play in Ukraine's efforts to expel Russia from its borders, intelligence experts like Jonathan Molick say don't expect them to make an immediate impact in the outcome of the war.
They have a few hurdles to overcome. They don't have as many pilots as they would need. They have some issues with maintenance and parts and other things, but ultimately any help in any way to Ukraine is a positive thing. And on the battle space, I would say that, again, as you had said, this is not a game changer per se. This isn't going to switch the flat or the forward line of troops in any significant way. However, it will give Ukraine the ability to hit what we call high-value targets.
Interestingly, that's a thought shared, at least in part, by those trusted to speak on behalf of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told the Associated Press the delivery of F-16s to Ukraine, quote, won't have any significant impact on the battlefield. There is no magic pill, no panacea for the armed forces of the Kyiv regime, he said in a conference call with reporters. After the emergence of those planes, their numbers will drop. They will be shot down and destroyed. Unsurprisingly, that is not a view shared by the airmen training to get in the cockpit and help determine the fate of their country.
It is really a super fun jet to fly. I'm not saying that MiG that I flew before is super boring, but the F-16 is definitely more agile. It easily moves. The moment you think of something, it turns. I felt proud, not only for myself, but only for the rest of the guys, and that we are doing it now. I know how much work has been done to have this opportunity.
While we don't know how many jets were provided in the first tranche, the ones that were on display appear to be from the Danish Air Force, equipped with AIM-120 missiles, as well as an electronic warfare system, radar jammer, missile warning system, and an array of countermeasures. In his official release on the jet's arrival, President Zelensky stressed a shortage of trained pilots and the limited number of F-16s will constrain their immediate battlefield impact. Still, the arrival of the first F-16s represents a significant step in Ukraine's effort to expel Russia from its borders, and it offers a full-circle moment after nearly 2 years of work to acquire the American-made fighters.
Serving you clarity through context, our mission at SAN is to deliver the news straight down the middle. We're different from mainstream media because we spotlight distorted headlines and show you how to do it too. Discover stories that right and left-leaning outlets are choosing not to cover by using our Media Mist tool. Download the SAN app and turn on notifications to have straight facts delivered right to your phone or tablet, and get straight facts anytime at SAN.com.
According to my producer, who loves obscure, centuries-old quotes that he assures me are real, Prussian general and military theorist Karl von Clausewitz once wrote, "The backbone of surprise is fusing speed with secrecy." Old von Clausewitz, yes, that's his real name, was right, and his statement is as true today as it was when he wrote it 200 years ago, and it perfectly describes the capabilities of our weapon of the week. Meet the Hawkeye Mobile Howitzer System, or the MHS. Made by AM General, the same people who gave the world the Humvee, this shoot-and-scoot solution eliminates the need to tow a howitzer by building it right into the vehicle and giving operators the ability to deploy and redeploy with, you guessed it, speed and secrecy.
So it's one single unit. You don't have to displace the howitzer or unhook the howitzer from the vehicle in order to fire the howitzer. So it's a little bit of a time saver.
It's an option that's been tested by the U.S. Army for several years, and while they haven't bought off on it just yet, that could change depending on recent events. Mike Evans, the director of AM General's Soft Recoil Technologies and Fires programs, told an audience at this year's U.S. Field Artillery Association's Fire Symposium the Hawkeye is likely to play a role in Ukraine's war against Russia's illegal invasion.
We recently put a 105 system into Ukraine. We shipped it on the 26th of April. It was received in Ukraine on the 2nd of April. We trained it for 2 weeks. They immediately went into testing, and that system's destined to be one of the first soft recoil systems in combat. So it's moving very quickly.
While not naming the Hawkeye directly, AM General has just one commercially available 105mm howitzer available. Equipped with a soft recoil system, the Hawkeye is rated to fire 3 rounds per minute, but can safely fire up to 8 rounds per minute for 3 minutes. In a May 2019 interview, Captain James Brock of the Illinois Army National Guard said that kind of performance is one artillery troops can definitely get behind.
Yeah, the soldiers were obviously excited. I mean, anytime you get an opportunity to work on any other howitzer system, whether it's a test system or just going from a 119er to a Paladin, right? If it's different, but it still goes boom and it's loud, they're always excited to try out a new weapon system.
As for the range of fire, if the 105 round is equipped with the extended range rocket-assisted M913, it can hit targets up to 12 miles away. Coming out of this year's Sea Airspace Symposium held by the U.S. Navy League, one of the big topics of discussion was the state of shipbuilding in the United States. Since we first reported on the topic in May, there were some interesting developments. Recently, 2 South Korean shipbuilders signed Master Ship Repair Agreements, or MSRAs, with the United States Navy. The respective agreements will provide a big boost in clearing a decades-long backlog of maintenance and repair needed for America's naval fleet. To break it all down, I caught up with the host of the popular YouTube channel, What is Going On with Shipping, for this week's Comms Check.
All right, Sal Mercogliano, friend of the show, thanks for joining us once again. I want to talk to you a little bit today about South Korea kind of entering the U.S. shipbuilding space. We have HD Hyundai Heavy Industries and Hanwha Ocean both signing those MSRAs in July. What were your initial takeaways when that news kind of came across your feeds?
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. I think it's not unexpected. There had been a big push by Secretary Del Toro, Navy Secretary, in part of his maritime statecraft to really expand the shipbuilding base. And one of his efforts has been to kind of bring the allies into the fold in both shipbuilding and ship repair. And we've seen elements of that. A recent agreement with India to start doing some ship repair for ships forward-based over in the Fifth Fleet. And I think Korea is really the next one. Korea is the second largest shipbuilder in the world behind China. So a natural agreement. We're seeing a Korean firm buying into Philly shipyard right now. So I think that for the United States, an alignment with Korea in terms of shipbuilding and ship repair is a natural progression.
The MSRA allows these two Korean companies to bid on repair, maintenance, and operations contracts. That's not shipbuilding yet, right? That's just like, this boat needs, the hull got damaged, so we need to fix the hull. It's not necessarily building anything at this point, right?
Right. And what we're looking at is that repair. So, remember, the 7th Fleet has a huge element that's forward deployed out in the area. We have ships permanently stationed out in Japan, and then we're rotating ships from Pearl Harbor and San Diego out to that region. And the availability, or the option to do availabilities out in Korea, will increase the forward presence. And I think that's what the U.S. is looking at. It's going to be very tough to build up a Navy to compete with the way the Chinese Navy is building right now. They are pumping out ships at a very fast rate. But the option you have is to make the assets you have more deployable. In other words, you can keep them forward deployed for a longer period of time. And that's what this agreement does. It allows you to take a ship, instead of having it come back to maybe Pearl Harbor Navy base or a shipyard on the west or east coast, you can stay forward deployed, get maintenance in, and that means that a destroyer or any other type of warship may be on station for a longer period of time.
When I was reading the press releases and the statements from both Hanwha and HD Hyundai, if you read between the lines, it's pretty obvious both of these companies want more of their share of U.S. naval shipbuilding and maritime and all that. Do you see this as just kind of the first step for more integration? 20 years down the road, maybe we have all of our ships being built in Korea.
Well, I don't ever foresee all our ships being built overseas. I do foresee the potential of Korea getting into this. Now, Korea has to, Korean shipbuilding is much different than U.S. shipbuilding in many ways. If, one of the problems that the Navy has is, contracting with shipbuilding and ship repair facilities and then changing the work order. That doesn't happen in Korean shipyards. I've been in Korean shipyards. I know Korean shipyards. They don't like that. They don't like kind of ad hoc and playing it by the ear. So that's going to be a big culture issue that's got to be resolved between Korea and the U.S. And I think this is one of those first steps. Let's see how this works. Korea is going to have to work with NAVSEA, Naval Sea Systems Command. That's an entity onto itself. It's a beast within the U.S. Navy. U.S. shipyards are used to working them. Their sole source customer is the U.S. Navy. Korea has options. They're building ships commercially. One of the things that Secretary Del Toro came back from is like, wow, Korean shipyards are building Aegis-class destroyers much cheaper than U.S. shipyards. Well, that's because that Korean shipyard is also building 24 tankers, container ships, and LNG carriers, so their profits aren't based on a single destroyer. And so I think there's going to be an element of culture here that has to be played out.
Let's expand on that a little bit more. When you talk about the element of the culture here, is U.S. shipbuilding, the industry as a whole, ripe for some culture change?
I think it is. I mean, one of the things that has happened since the 1980s is that U.S. shipbuilding has kind of wholeheartedly embraced U.S. Navy. There was an effort that we eliminated construction subsidies within the United States for commercial shipping, for international trade. So all our ships that are involved in international trade are built overseas. That meant that the shipyards, after the closure of the public Navy yards that used to build ships, they don't do it, they do repairs now. Basically, every U.S. shipyard is now sole sourced with the U.S. Navy. And so that is a big issue. And I think there is an element of culture that can be brought in. I also think diversification is a key thing. I think one of the things that U.S. shipyards can learn is commercial shipbuilding is not a bad thing. It allows you to retain a worker base. It allows you to enhance technology and components. Yes, a container ship is not a Navy destroyer, but you still need to build a hull. You still have machinery elements. There's still some key elements that you can have. So the hope here is that by cross-pollinating Korean shipyards and maybe U.S. shipyards, you get the best of both worlds.
Sal Mercogliano, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll definitely be ringing your bell in the future.
Thanks, Ryan. It's great to be with you.
All opinions expressed in this segment are solely the opinions of the contributors.
Well, that just about does it for us this week at Weapons and Warfare. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You can watch the show and follow us at all of the places on your screen now, And you can send us an email to weaponsandwarfare@san.com. Before we end things this week, though, I want to talk about the importance of deterrence. Judging by the comments on some of my stories, a lot of folks, quite frankly, don't seem to understand it. There's usually more than a few people asking why the money spent on weaponry can't be spent on something else. Now, let me be clear. I am not advocating for war, but se vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. That's the essence of deterrence within the context of the U.S. military. Maintain a fighting force so powerful, the thought of challenging it would be lunacy, forcing enemies to back down. We saw a microcosm of this idea in action recently when the U.S. Air Force sent a dozen F-22 fighters to the Middle East. The 5th Gen Raptor is the world's premier air superiority fighter. If an aerial dogfight does happen to break out, this thing is a pit bull in a ring of poodles. The last time Iranian pilots encountered an F-22 is the stuff of legend. It happened back in 2013. There was a pair of F-4 Phantoms from the Iranian Air Force tracking an MQ-1 Reaper and were trying to engage it. Well, out of nowhere, these F-4 Phantom pilots heard over their radio an American voice that said, "You ought to go home." The F-22 pilot had maneuvered underneath the Phantom and then behind it without the pilots of the Phantoms ever knowing it. Not a great feeling. And it showed just how overmatched Iran really is against a major military power. Perhaps Iran's supreme leader was pondering this incident when he gave the order to hold off on retaliation for the time being. I mean, Iran was full steam ahead with a plan to attack Israel in a way that would be just enough to hurt, but not enough to cause a regional war. Hours after it was announced F-22s would be sent to the region, Iran started balking. As of this recording, the Ayatollah still hasn't launched a major attack against Israel. Maybe he still will, but that won't change the fact American force posturing had an immediate impact, even if it was just to buy some time in order to get more resources in place. As much as we want to talk about peaceful solutions and diplomacy, those strategies only work when the adversary is also interested in peace and diplomacy. Iran, Russia, North Korea, China, their actions of late prove peace and diplomacy aren't exactly top priorities. So yeah, send in the Raptors. Remind bad actors they ought to go home. For senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and graphics designer Dakota Petillo, I'm Ryan Robertson with Straight Arrow News, signing off.